They read my eulogy, cried over my casket, and told the world I was gone, except I wasn't. I watched my own funeral from a phone screen, knowing my parents had faked my death, just to steal what was mine. But when I walked into the reception, alive, breathing, and holding proof, you should have seen their faces. If you want more jaw-dropping family betrayals like this, don't forget to subscribe. You won't believe what comes next. I was stirring my coffee, half asleep and annoyed that the almond milk had gone bad, when my phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Mrs. Langford. I hadn't seen or heard from her in nearly 10 years. Our former neighbor, the one who always brought over lemon bars during the holidays and whispered about people's business with a glint of amusement in her eyes. Why would she be texting me now? The message was simple. No hello. No context. Just 6 words. I'm so sorry for your parents. I blinked. My stomach twisted. Attached was a video file. I hesitated. Then I tapped play. It opened with a wide shot of St. Albans Church, the same church my parents used to drag me to on Christmas and Easter, where I spent most of my childhood squirming in pews under my mother's disapproving glare. The camera zoomed in shakily and I saw familiar stained glass windows, the same burgundy carpet, and 2 figures standing at the front. My parents. My father, in a stiff black suit, was holding a paper with trembling hands. My mother stood beside him in a lacy black dress, clutching a handkerchief, eyes red, but the tears weren't real. I know her face too well. I've seen her cry for real. This wasn't it. Behind them stood a closed casket. And next to it a photo, my photo. The one from my college graduation. Smiling, cap slightly crooked, cheeks flushed from the heat that day. I stopped breathing. My father's voice echoed from the church's old sound system. Emily Grace was a complicated soul. But she was our daughter. We loved her. We tried everything. She struggled. But we held hope until the end. I dropped the mug. It shattered against the kitchen floor, but I didn't flinch. My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt like I was underwater, drowning in disbelief. He continued. Though her passing was sudden and tragic, we believe she's finally at peace. Away from confusion. From temptation. From the chaos that took her from us. What the hell was I hearing? I scrubbed backward and watched again. The entire thing played like a theater production. My mother dabbed at non-existent tears with a tissue she didn't even bother to wet. Her mascara was flawless. My dad's tone was practiced, mechanical. There was nothing grieving about it. They weren't mourning me. They were declaring me dead. And I was very much alive. Standing barefoot in my apartment in Seattle with coffee on the stove and a dead plant on the windowsill and my heartbeat climbing up my throat. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some awful joke. They held a funeral. For me. And no one, not one single person, thought to check if I was actually gone. I watched the video again, this time through a layer of shaking tears. The camera panned slowly across the congregation. I recognized so many faces. My childhood piano teacher. My cousin Maddie. Old neighbors. Distant relatives I hadn't seen since I was 17. Everyone dressed in black. Everyone believing I was in that coffin. Gone. Buried. Mourned. The video ended with a slow zoom on my framed photo, surrounded by lilies. I stood there in my kitchen for a long time, hands clenched on the counter, unable to move, unable to think. I wasn't just cut off anymore. I wasn't just disowned. They had buried me alive. And they thought I'd stay dead. They didn't always hate me. That's the part that hurts the most. There was a time, God, it feels like a different lifetime, when I was their little girl. Emily Grace. The straight-A student. The church volunteer. The one who baked cookies with Mom every Saturday before Christmas. I used to believe if I just followed the rules, if I smiled hard enough and said the right things, they'd always be proud of me. But the truth was, their love had conditions. And I didn't realize I was standing on thin ice until it cracked. I came out when I was 23. It wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't a spectacle. It was over coffee in our old kitchen after my first real relationship ended and I was heartbroken. I needed my mom. I wanted my dad to tell me I'd be okay. I thought, stupidly, that telling the truth might bring us closer. Instead, my mother blinked twice, looked down at her cup and whispered, "That's not who you are." My father's chair scraped back from the table. He didn't say a word. He just left the room. That silence was louder than any screaming could have been. From that day forward, things started to rot beneath the surface. At first it was subtle. The polite distance at family dinners, the way they always changed the subject when Carla came up, how they stopped posting pictures of me online. Then came the real cuts, uninviting me from my sister's baby shower, removing me from the family group chat, not coming to my first gallery show even though it was only 2 hours away. The last time I saw them in person was 4 years ago, Christmas Eve. They said they didn't want to make the holiday uncomfortable. I showed up anyway, thinking maybe the sight of me might thaw something. It didn't. They served dinner with one extra chair. For my brother, Evan, who wasn't even in the country. Not for Carla. Not for me. That night, after everyone else left, my mother sat me down and said, "You've made your choices, Emily. And we've made ours. You can't live in two worlds." I remember staring at the fireplace and thinking how cold the flames looked in that house. How the warmth never seemed to reach the corners of the room. When I left Charleston, I told myself I was done hoping. That I didn't need their approval. That my life, my love, was valid whether they saw it or not. Carla told me I was brave. I wasn't. I was just tired. Tired of begging to exist. But I didn't expect them to erase me. I didn't think they'd go so far as to dig a grave for a daughter who never died. And maybe that's on me. For believing they were still just hurt. That somewhere deep down they still loved me even if they didn't understand me. That if I got married one day maybe my mother would still show up with a corsage. That my father might still walk me down the aisle, even if it wasn't the wedding they wanted. Those dreams had clung to me like cobwebs, fragile, invisible, but still there. Now I see them for what they are. All of it. I opened my closet, pulled down the box marked home. Inside were a few faded photos, some old church bulletins, and the last birthday card my parents ever sent me. It was unsigned. Just a typed message. "We hope this year brings you clarity." Clarity. I laughed. Loud and bitter. That was the last gift they ever gave me. No. Now they've given me a funeral. It was finally clear. They weren't grieving. They were done. They'd buried their shame. Buried their disappointment. And they'd used my face, my name, to make it all official. But what they didn't know, what they could never understand, was that I wasn't the same girl they tried to suffocate under their expectations. That Emily was already dead. And what rose from her ashes? She's coming home. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own face surrounded by lilies. I saw my father reading my eulogy. My mother's dry tears. I heard their voices echoing like a dirge in a cathedral. "We hope she's finally at peace." Peace. What a word to use when you're driving the final nail into your daughter's coffin. I didn't just want answers anymore. I needed them. So I started digging. First, I pulled up the obituary they submitted to the local paper. The date of death? March 14th. Cause of death? Fatal car accident on I-5 near Portland. That was 2 weeks ago. I was alive. Oh, I had brunch that morning. Pancakes with Carla. She teased me about getting syrup in my hair. But someone had gone to great lengths to make it all look real. The accident had been reported by name. My name. It had a case number, a coroner's record, and a brief news blurb in a Charleston obituary blog. There was even a closed casket due to nature of the injuries note. No photo of the scene. No police statement. Just paperwork. Falsified. Somehow they'd made me legally dead. I called the hospital listed in the report. Pretended to be a relative seeking closure. They put me through to a clerk who pulled the file. "Yes," she said, "Emily Grace Connor. Female. Late 20s. Unrecognizable trauma. Family confirmed identity via photo and belongings." "What belongings?" I asked. "A bracelet. And a wallet with partial ID. Damaged." "What about visual confirmation?" There was a pause. "The body was badly burned. Your parents waived full autopsy and chose expedited cremation." I nearly dropped the phone. They hadn't just written me off. They'd cremated someone and told the world it was me. I asked the clerk if I could request a copy of the original footage from the confirmation. You know, the awful procedure where loved ones are shown a body for identification. She hesitated but eventually forwarded the link, password protected. I opened it, and there she was. A woman, my build, my skin tone, lying under a sheet. Face obscured, features distorted from what looked like fire damage. And there stood my parents. Cold. My mother stared down at the body, eyes dry. She said, "That's her." Not even a blink. Not even a pause. I stared at the video until my vision blurred. They'd found someone. Some nameless woman. Someone probably with no family, no one to ask questions. They'd taken her death and given it my name. I checked the timestamp. One day after my aunt died. And that's when it all clicked. My Aunt Evelyn had money. A lot of it. Old family wealth. Everyone knew she'd been planning to divide it evenly among her siblings and their children. But a few years ago she told me over tea that she planned to leave me something extra. "You're the only one who sees me," she said. "The only one who calls just to talk." She was the only one who called me after I came out. The only one who sent Carla a Christmas card. The only one who said she was proud of the life I was building. She never mentioned the amount. Just that she had updated the will to include a clause, "To Emily Grace Connor if living." If not, her share would revert to her brother. My father. They knew. They saw the clause. They saw an opportunity. And they buried me alive. I felt sick. My stomach churned like something had died in me after all. And that woman, the one on the stretcher, who was she? Did she have a name? Family? Did anyone care that she was gone? Or was she just a convenient body to use as a stand-in for a daughter my parents had decided didn't deserve to exist? This wasn't grief. It wasn't ignorance. This was a coordinated erasure. Fraud. A crime. And I was going to make sure everyone saw it. I didn't buy a return ticket. When I booked my flight to Charleston, it wasn't a visit. It was a reckoning. No one knew I was coming. That was the point. If I'd learned anything from my parents, it was that surprise was power. And for once, it was my turn to hold it. I sat on the plane in silence, hoodie pulled up, earbuds in, but no music playing. Just white noise and my own thoughts, looping like a reel I couldn't shut off. My body was buzzing, some mix of grief, rage, and raw disbelief. The idea that my parents had stood over a stranger's body and called her me, it still didn't feel real. But I had the evidence. Copies of the video. The coroner's file. A copy of the forged death certificate. Everything stacked neatly in a folder in my carry-on. And in my pocket, not to a door but to the truth. Before I left Seattle, I'd contacted a local lawyer. A friend of Carla's boss, the kind who liked chess and corporate takedowns. When I laid everything out, he didn't even blink. "This isn't just fraud," he'd said, tapping the file. "It's calculated inheritance manipulation. They're screwed. We'll file immediately. But if you want to confront them first, just be careful. People who fake your death don't usually welcome your resurrection." I'd smiled at that. A bitter, hollow thing. I'm not going back to be welcomed. My first stop wasn't my childhood home or the church. It was the law office handling my Aunt Evelyn's estate. Her lawyer, a thin man with nervous hands and owl-like glasses, nearly choked on his coffee when I walked in. You're supposed to be." "I know," I said flatly. "Try not to look too disappointed." He blinked, face turning a shade paler. "This changes everything." He gave me a copy of the revised will. The clause was there, plain as day. "To Emily Grace Connor if living, the full value of properties located in Vermont and associated liquid accounts." Living. I looked him dead in the eyes. "Well, I'm standing right here." He nodded slowly, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I'll contact the court." Quietly. "There's going to be fallout." Good. I left his office and drove downtown to the street where I used to live. Everything looked the same. Too same. The kind of frozen-in-time sameness that feels more like a mausoleum than a memory. I parked across from the church. St. Albans. There were still funeral wreaths at the entrance. My funeral. People had cried for me in there. Worn black. Spoke kind lies about a girl they hadn't seen in years. All while the people who killed me on paper soaked in sympathy and gathered signatures on legal forms. I watched the old double doors for a long time, half expecting someone to walk out and scream when they saw me. But no one did. I wasn't ready to face them yet. Not like that. So instead I went to the one person I trusted most in this town. Andy. My cousin. He was 11 years younger than me, but when we were kids he'd followed me around like a shadow. We'd built blanket forts. Watched horror movies when our parents weren't looking. I taught him how to sneak candy into movie theaters. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Not since I was cut off. But I remembered his warmth. His loyalty. I showed up at his work, an independent bookstore, and waited outside until he stepped out for a smoke break. He froze when he saw me. The cigarette dropped from his fingers. "Emily," he whispered, like saying my name too loud might wake a ghost. I nodded. His eyes filled instantly. He staggered forward and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. I thought, Jesus, I thought you were gone," he breathed. "I cried for you. I wrote letters. I lit a candle in church every Sunday." I pulled away gently. "I know. I saw you in the video." He blinked. "You saw?" I told him everything. The fake documents. The fake death. The stolen inheritance. The woman they burned. He didn't interrupt. Just sat down on the curb, hands in his hair, shaking. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a journal. "I kept writing you," he whispered. "Even after. Letters I never sent. I knew something wasn't right. But they told me to stop asking questions. Said I was upsetting the family." I flipped through the pages. My name. Over and over. Letters full of grief, doubt, love. Tears blurred my vision. I wasn't just coming back for justice anymore. I was coming back for people like Andy. People who believed in me even when everyone else tried to bury me. And the next time I walked into that church, it wouldn't be to mourn the girl they buried. It would be to show the world she never died. I timed it perfectly. The memorial reception was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the old Charleston Country Club. The same place my mother once said wasn't appropriate for my art show because certain friends might be uncomfortable. How poetic. Now it was hosting the after-party for my death. I parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest, file folder tucked under my coat, heels clicking like punctuation across the pavement. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. There's a strange calm that comes when you've already lost everything. When the worst thing has happened and you're still standing. The entrance was lined with black satin bows and a large blown-up photo of me, the same one from the funeral video. They'd added a floral border and an embossed gold plate. "In loving memory, Emily Grace Connor, 1994 to 2024. I walked right past it. Inside it was all crystal glasses, tight embraces, and southern condolences. My mother was standing near the piano, her hand lightly resting on the arm of the estate lawyer. My father was by the fireplace, nodding solemnly as someone gripped his shoulder. They were mourning me, and collecting sympathy like it was currency. I stood near the entrance for a moment. No one noticed me, until they did. Gasps. A wine glass shattered near the dessert table. Heads turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. My father looked up. His eyes locked on mine. Everything around him dissolved. "Emily," he choked out. My mother's back stiffened. She turned slowly, her face draining of color. I stepped forward. My voice was low but clear. "I hope I'm not late." The silence was absolute. Even the piano player stopped mid-note. My mother stumbled back, gripping the edge of a chair. What is this?" I raised an eyebrow. "You tell me. I hear I died in a fiery crash 2 weeks ago. Yet here I am. Fully intact. Not even a limp." A few relatives backed away. One older woman made the sign of the cross. My father swallowed hard. You shouldn't be here. Neither should a fake death certificate, but here we are." I reached into my coat and pulled out the file. "This," I said, "is the report you submitted to the court. This is the confirmation video, where you stood over a stranger's body and called her me. And this," I slid the forged coroner's note onto the table. "This is your signature authorizing cremation. Without an autopsy. Without proof. Just one burned bracelet and your word." I let that hang in the air. My mother found her voice brittle and sharp. "You don't understand. We were protecting your memory. You chose a different life. We had no choice." "No choice." I laughed. "You had dozens. You could have called me. You could have written. You could have said, 'We don't agree, but you're still our daughter.' But instead you forged my death to steal a house in Vermont." Murmurs. Some guests stepped away from them. The estate lawyer's face paled. My father looked like he aged a decade in 10 seconds. "I loved you," he said softly, as if that would fix anything. "I still do." I stared at him. "Then why was it so easy to bury me?" The silence that followed was the most honest thing that ever passed between us. Then from behind me a voice broke the tension. "She's telling the truth." Andy stepped forward, journal in hand, his voice steady. "She's alive. She never left us. You just wanted her gone." He turned to the crowd. They lied to everyone here. For money. For image. For control. My mother's eyes flashed. You don't know what you're talking about, Andrew. No, he cut in. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I turned back to the room, scanning the shocked faces. You've been to one funeral, I said. But this is the second. This is where the mask dies. Where the truth gets buried, and something better rises in its place. I left the file on the main table, next to the photo they'd used to eulogize me. Then I turned and walked out. This time I wasn't the ghost. They were. Andy showed up at my motel the next morning, knocking on the door with the kind of urgency that makes your stomach drop. For a split second I thought maybe something had happened. Another lie, another twist, another betrayal. But when I opened the door he just stood there, holding a cardboard shoebox. I didn't know where else to bring this, he said. His voice cracked at the edges. It's yours. I stepped aside to let him in. The room still smelled faintly of stale coffee and motel soap, but Andy didn't seem to notice. He sat on the edge of the bed like he'd done it 100 times before, like we were kids again hiding from grown-up arguments in the guest room during Thanksgiving. He opened the box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some written in spiral notebooks. Others on folded printer paper. Some were stained. Some were torn. All addressed to me. I started writing the night after the funeral, he said. I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about how none of it made sense. He handed me the top letter. Dear Emily, I don't know if you can hear me, but I have to believe you can. I stopped reading. My throat closed. Andy looked away. I tried to ask questions. After the service, I asked why there wasn't an obituary in the bigger papers. Why we didn't see the crash on the news. Why no one saw your body. Your mom pulled me aside and said I was upsetting people. My dad told me to respect the process. They all looked at me like I was the problem. He laughed, bitter and quiet. I started to think I was crazy. But I couldn't shake it. You don't just disappear like that. Not you. I sank into the armchair, holding the box like it was made of glass. Every word inside was a piece of someone else's grief. Someone who loved me. Someone who never stopped believing I might come back. They used your death to control the narrative, Andy said. To make everyone forget you. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. I met his eyes. What they did to me was monstrous. But what they did to you. My voice trembled. They made you grieve a living person. They made you carry a loss that didn't belong to you. Andy looked down at his hands. I lit a candle for you. Every week. I skipped my college midterms to fly home for the funeral. I threw away the birthday gift I'd already bought you. Tears welled in his eyes and he tried to blink them away. I thought I hadn't done enough. That maybe if I'd reached out more, visited you, told them to let it go, maybe you wouldn't have died. That broke me. I crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. A real one. Tight and shaking. They tried to bury me, I whispered. But they buried your trust too. He didn't answer. He just held on. And in that moment something shifted. This wasn't just about my inheritance. It wasn't just about revenge. This was about everyone they hurt. Everyone who cried. Everyone who wondered if they'd failed me. They used my death like a weapon, and the shrapnel hit everyone who loved me. Later, as we sat on the floor sorting through the letters, Andy asked quietly, "What happens now?" I stared at the envelope containing the lawyer's summons. Now, they don't just lose their money. They lose their version of the truth. He nodded slowly, then reached into the box and pulled out one final letter. Sealed, dated the night before the funeral. Dear Emily, tomorrow I'll say goodbye to you in front of the whole family. But I don't believe you're gone. I think you're out there somewhere still fighting. If you ever come back, I want you to know, I never stopped waiting. And I never will. He handed it to me. I meant every word, he said. I smiled through the tears. I know. This was the funeral that mattered. Not the one with fake tears and estate lawyers. This was the one with real mourning, real pain, and a real resurrection. And this time I wasn't rising alone. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Beige walls. Scuffed benches. A faint smell of coffee and stale wood polish. But the silence inside was cathedral-level heavy. My parents sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by their lawyer. A man who looked more like a funeral director than a defense attorney. My mother wore her pearls. My father kept his hands folded tightly on the table. They didn't look at me. It was fine. I wasn't here to be seen. The judge glanced over the stack of documents we'd submitted. Death certificate, identification video, signed affidavits, real estate transfers, and a complete timeline of forged paperwork from the coroner's office to the bank. "Miss Connor," he said, voice neutral, "you're here to contest not only the validity of your reported death but to bring formal charges of inheritance fraud against your parents. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." He turned toward my parents. "And you, Mr. and Mrs. Connor, still maintain that your daughter is deceased?" A long pause. Then my mother finally spoke. "We believed she was lost to us. In every way that mattered." Not a denial. Not even a real answer. Just more poetic poison. "Your Honor," my attorney stood. "The defendants not only declared their daughter dead without legal cause, they profited from that lie. They claimed her inheritance, misused estate funds, and permanently altered government records to erase a living person." He handed the judge the flash drive. Exhibit F. Their identification of a body later proven to be Jane Doe 2417. Not Emily Grace Connor. The video played in eerie silence. There they were, my parents standing over a covered body. "That's her," my mother said. Flat. Final. Wrong. When it ended, the judge folded his hands and looked at my parents again. "You cremated a stranger. For financial gain. How do you plead?" My father opened his mouth, but my mother spoke first. Her voice was ice. "We were protecting our family. Emily chose a path that made her dead to us long before we signed any papers." The gallery murmured. Even the court clerk shifted uncomfortably. I stood. "So you replaced me? With a corpse?" My father finally turned to me. "You left us, Emily. You turned your back on everything we gave you." I stepped closer. "No. I turned my back on the lies. The control. The chain you wrapped around me like a leash." He shook his head, voice rising. "You were supposed to be more. A lawyer. A leader. Not this. This," I said, gesturing to myself, "is alive. This is free. And what did you choose instead? To kill me on paper? To stand over a dead woman's body and call her your daughter? Just to steal a house?" The judge banged his gavel once. "Order." The room stilled. My parents went silent. Then the estate attorney, Evelyn's lawyer, rose from the back. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm but firm, "there's one more document for the court to consider. A private addendum to Ms. Evelyn Connor's final will. Recently unsealed." He handed it forward. In it, Ms. Evelyn states, "Should any individual attempt to manipulate my estate through fraud, misrepresentation, or by falsely declaring the death of my niece, Emily Grace Connor, they are to be disinherited in full." Gasps. My mother flinched like she'd been slapped. He continued, "As executor, I have honored that clause. The Vermont property, all liquid accounts, and the trust are now legally transferred to Emily Grace Connor. Effective immediately." My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My mother's pearls clinked as her hands began to tremble. The judge gave them one last glance. "This court finds substantial evidence of fraudulent intent and document falsification. Criminal charges will be filed pending state review. Civil restitution is also advised." Bang. Gavel down. Just like that, it was done. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited like vultures, but I kept walking. I didn't need the cameras. I didn't need applause. I just needed the silence. And for once, it wasn't the kind that suffocates. It was the kind that sets you free. It was cloudy the day I visited her grave. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill just outside of Burlington, Vermont, surrounded by old maples and silence thick enough to swallow your thoughts. I hadn't been here since her actual funeral, the real one. Not the mockery my parents performed for their own gain, but the quiet, honest service for the only family member who had ever truly seen me. Evelyn. And Ev. The woman who taught me that a good question was more powerful than a loud opinion. Who mailed me books about strong women even when my parents called them inappropriate. Who told me I didn't have to be understood to be worthy. I knelt in front of her headstone. Polished granite. Simple lettering. Nothing flowery. Just like her. Evelyn May Connor. 1946 to 2024. She saw what others looked past. I traced my fingers over her name. The air was cold, but my chest felt warm. I opened the small leather-bound notebook I'd brought, the same one I'd used to scribble poetry in back when I thought being quiet was safer than being loud. Then I read aloud. Dear Aunt Ev, I'm sorry I couldn't protect your legacy from the vultures. But I came back. I stood up. I took the name they tried to erase and made them say it again. In court. In front of everyone. I wiped my eyes. You always said I was stronger than I believed. I never wanted to be. But maybe being strong isn't about not breaking. Maybe it's about choosing to rebuild anyway. Thank you for giving me a place to rebuild. I closed the notebook and laid a single white lily at the base of the stone. Real goodbye. Not like the one they gave me. This time I didn't leave grieving. I left grounded. Back at the Vermont house. My house now. I walked through the front door with the key Evelyn left in her final file. Carla was already inside, curled up on the old floral couch in the sunroom, flipping through one of Evelyn's photo albums. She looked up as I entered, smiling with that familiar mix of love and relief. How was it? I sat beside her. Felt final. In a good way. She nodded. You ready to settle in? For the first time in years, I said, yeah, I think I am. We spent the afternoon unpacking boxes Evelyn had labeled by hand, books Emily might like, Carla's corner, old recipes, keep or toss. Every drawer, every shelf whispered her presence. It didn't feel haunted. It felt held. At sunset, I took a walk around the property. The wind stirred through the tall grass, and for a moment, I could almost hear Evelyn's voice again. Don't let people tell you what family means. You decide what that word holds. Not them. And I had. I chose Andy, who never stopped believing. I chose Carla, who never asked me to be smaller. I chose myself. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. My old life was gone. Not buried, not burned, but shed, like dead skin finally peeled away. They held a funeral for me once. This time I was the one doing the burying. I buried their version of me. The compliant daughter. The silent one. The shame. And what rose in her place was someone they couldn't kill with lies. Someone alive. Someone free.